we are about to hear from Rosa Bordallo, who was an artist resident and is still a current artist resident, but her residency began in 2024 and will culminate in a performance and some materials being presented at a June 7th event, which is on our Eventbrite. And with that, I will hand this over to Rosa to discuss her residency experience.
Thanks, Ava. Yeah, this is just a presentation I put together. I have to say, talking about my work is way more uncomfortable than just performing. And I did struggle to really piece together like a coherent narrative. But I think I landed somewhere that could make sense. So my presentation is called Grief is a Catalyst, and there are a couple reasons why I chose this as the title and the theme. First of all, the NCL is the Naval Cemetery Landscape. So the NCL is a burial ground, and in my time that I've spent there, I was really conscientious of that fact of the space being a place of remembrance and like a memorial for the people whose remains are still there and whose identities remain anonymous. So there's the connection to the NCL as a place and a space where in a sense we're still collectively grieving, right? These anonymous burials. But then there's also just grief that I find as a very, I find as a theme in my work a lot. So I think my music really tends to come from grief and also speaks to other people's grief and is, I think some people really resonate with my music because it kind of allows for that contemplation and that mental and emotional space to process, grief and other pains. So that is where I'm starting with how grief can be a catalyst for creativity and other things, positive, just personal transformation and positive changes in your life. So with that being said, I'll just give a brief introduction. I'm an indie musician and singer-songwriter. I've been doing this work since 2005. So I've been in the city since 2002, when I moved here from Guam to study film. And I've spent, like, at this point, I spent a little over half my life living in New York City. So New York City was really, a place where I had a lot of formative experiences as an artist, and a aspiring musician and all that. So in my time making music, I was in a band and we put out a few albums. I was a solo artist performing under Manette, and I started to put out music under my own name, Rosa Bordallo. So all of these things you can find on my Bandcamp page. And then the Naval Cemetery Landscape is, so here I just put a brief description of it, but I also wanted to really put here why it's so special to me. In my time, in my time that I spent there and then learning about what the NCL is and like what it offers, there's three things that really stand out for me. The NCL is a native plant meadow, so it's a pollinator habitat. And what really astounded me is that it's not just a sanctuary for like monarch butterflies. It's really a wildlife sanctuary for so many species. The diversity, the biodiversity of this relatively little space in the midst of New York City, right, in this huge metropolis. The biodiversity is really incredible. I didn't list everything here because I'm not, I'm not a scientist. I'm not skilled to tell you everything that exists there, but I'll just tell you off the top of my head, like um, the eastern redbud, which is a early flowering tree that makes beautiful pink flowers. That I really loved. I missed that little tree. I love that tree. There's the cranberry viburnum shrubbery that's like really. I remember it like being this wall of shrubbery, and learning about how the berries on the cranberry viburnum are really provide food like in the fall and winter months when there isn't a lot of other food around. So like the NCL really helped me shift my mindset from being someone who is a city dweller and, just in the normal hustle and bustle of the city, just paying attention to the train and paying attention to like modern things. And it really like helped me shift into someone who is just so much more appreciative of nature and really in awe of all the little ways that life exists in this city, right? So at the bottom of this slide, I just mentioned other things. Like, of course, there's the milkweed. I think maybe more people who visited the NCL are familiar with the milkweed and the monarch butterflies and the caterpillars that can only exist on the milkweed plants. But then there's so many other sources of sustenance and shelter there. It's also interesting to see the NCL as a bird sanctuary because I learned just all the different ways birds exist in this space. Like the meadow provides, the meadow is a feeding ground for certain birds who are really going to eat a lot of like insects and stuff. And then the trees, the different kinds of trees are perch, spots for different kinds of birds to perch. So a hawk will maybe be on the tippity top of a tree to like, look over the whole landscape and do its hunting, or a kestrel or something, and then other birds will need that shelter from, a predator. So you've got other birds that are going to do more of their hopping in the meadow or in the shrubbery. So all of this is just to say that when I really sat and thought about what the NCL, like what my experiences there were like, it just made me realize like how much I learned and how much more appreciation I have for wildlife and for nature because of my time there. And it's not like I didn't have any of that, it's just the fact that it really helped me deepen that appreciation. The other thing I want to talk about on this slide is that it is a retreat from the bustling city, and it's a retreat because it's a third space. A third space is like, a third space is referred to places we can be where we're not working and we're not at home. I believe I have that definition right. But like a coffee shop is a third space. A park is a third space. A gym, a sports gym is a third space. But what's great about the NCL is that it's a third space where you don't have to do anything. You don't have to buy anything. There's no admission fee, which I think is incredible. It's open to the public. It's a private. It's privately owned, but it is open to the public. And I just think that's incredible. I think that it's a wonderfully unique space in the city. And the fact that it also isn't super accessible to public transportation, so you do have to like walk or you have to take a bus to get there. I think that's that's one reason why it's really cool and interesting, is because you kind of feel like you're on a little journey to get there, and it's like your reward for that trek, you find this like secret garden. So that's the second thing I really appreciate about the NCL. And then the third thing is that it is a memorial space. It's hollowed ground. It was intentionally constructed to be a place where people can honor you know, the lives that pass through this space, not just like how it is a burial ground, but also the fact that there's so much history in this space. It was the cemetery for a naval hospital. But you know, there are other parts of its history that are really interesting that I won't go into detail now. So I think just that third aspect of it being very intentionally constructed and um, you know, really a memorial, I guess, in a sense, is a third thing I appreciate about the NCL. So this slide is talking about my works in progress, and I have to be honest, the past several months, so basically it's spring now, and I started this residency last summer. It's really been a struggle to be creative. But I also have enough experience with I have enough trust in my creative process that I know that what I'm experiencing is more like a dormancy, not necessarily a creative block, not necessarily something for me to be like afraid of. But that's why I label this works in progress, because like even though I have the mixtape and that I'm gonna make a few more copies of this mixtape. Even though I have like a complete work, I feel like it's still not as complete as I want it to be. Like I want to do a few more things. So I'm calling this a works in progress. So Compost My Grief is the mixtape I came up with. It's both analog and digital. I have a I have a tape. I'm going to make a few more copies of it. I'm going to dub a few copies of this tape where I included all my original songs, but songs from both my time uh, performing as Manette and as well as songs I wrote under my own name. And the way I selected the songs, you know, I'm really trying to, well, here, I'll actually start with this. The reason why I decided to come up with like a playlist and, you know, a collection of songs is because when I was at the NCL and just walking around on my own, I realized that, like, I guess depending on the time of year, you can hear the traffic more or less. So like I think in the summer when all the like foliage grows and it's thicker, I think the sound is dampened. But when you're there like in the fall or like late winter, like you really like hear more of that traffic. So I actually wanted to create um you know, I wanted to make a playlist so that a visitor could have music to listen to that was like intentionally chosen for that space. And then that itself is like a buffer that kind of puts you more in the cocoon of the NCL and um, more of that mindset of the NCL. So yeah, so the songs I selected, you know, just when I was walking around listening to different songs of mine, I just realized like, wow, it's almost like these songs like grew up from this ground. Like it's, you know, it's very kind of heavy material, but very pensive, very contemplative, and also very naturalistic. Like you know, these are songs that are mostly acoustic or very light production, you know, lo-fi production. So I think that's also very resonant with the space. And then, you know, I have a cassette tape, I have a little cassette player, portable cassette player that I'll be, you know, giving the NCL for visitors to use. But then I'm also going to create, I'm going to have this available online digitally and, you know, available through a link, a QR code at the NCL, but it won't be available like from anywhere. It'll just be a QR code that you can access at the NCL so that if you're there and you want to like access this music, at least it's still like place-based. Um, so that is the playlist or the mixtape. And then the second project that is in progress, I'm finally starting to write new material for my next album, and I keep having this phrase in my mind, compost for the masses. I've gotten really into gardening this past year, and I finally have like land for a garden. So that's really special. This is my first year like really starting a vegetable garden now that I've moved upstate. So um yeah, so I call it my resistance garden. I'm not the only person that come up with that phrase, but I love the idea of a resistance garden. Um, growing your own food, trying to and growing food for others too. I think that's really special. So Compost for the Masses is my third solo album. I don't know if I'll keep that title, but the way I write for my albums is there's usually like a phrase or a working title that really centers me and like just keeps me kind of inspired and like motivated to keep writing in that direction. So that's what I'm holding for now. And then I have a couple of other projects that have spawned in just the last, few months um, that I think like are still connected to the NCL, just that connection to nature and that connection to, really wanting to be like a steward of nature, right? Like that's the other thing I appreciate about the NCL is that it's not about like keeping nature away from us and like kind of in a museum, like we just look at it. It's actually recognizing that nature is just always in cycles, and like we respect the ways that we respect all these processes. Like humans are part of the processes of nature, I guess, if that makes sense. I'm kind of going in the weeds there, but but I could talk a little bit more about those additional projects later in this presentation. So yeah, so I created this slide because I also wanted to call out the fact that um, making music and anyone who has a creative practice, anyone who makes art, you don't do that in a vacuum. You do that like in addition to all the other things going on in your life. So in my life, like I've been grieving, really, honestly, really, I've been grieving for years at this point because I've been grieving since my father passed away, and then my grandparents and my aunts and uncles, and I have a cousin who passed away. So it's I feel like there's like different levels of grief I have access to, and but like day to day, like you're just sort of like numb to those things because you have to compartmentalize it. But I'm calling it out because funerals are really so essential and central to our grieving process, and funerals are is that's actually something I've missed in my own life. I've lived very far away from most of my family for most of my adult life, so um, when funerals happen, I'd have to the travel and the cost, and also the fact that I have a phobia of flying. It's like all these things have just made it so that I can't really attend funerals, or I haven't been able to attend funerals. So I'm just connecting that to this residency because the grieving process, it's like because of that lack of ceremony in my life, I've had to find other ways um to grieve. I've had to like make my own process of grieving, right? So there's jobs and bills, there's day jobs, there's all the different ways we pay our bills. I've been dealing with that, and then this need for solitude that has become like really um I would say it's really peaked in the past couple of years for me. And so my need for solitude finally shifted where I decided I needed to leave the city. So I got this artist residency at a really like transitional time for me too, because it was a time when I decided to leave New York City after 20, 22 years. Yeah, something over 20 years of living in the city. So I moved upstate with my partner, and that's where I am now. And it was definitely a change for the better. I'm very happy with that. But yeah, this is another slide just to um, talk about the playlist, the cassette. This is the cassette here. I'm I'm thinking I'm gonna dub a few more copies, and each copy will have like original art. Like I'm gonna, draw different things on each one. And then on the right side, these are just thumbnails of like my previous albums. So the playlist draws from my previous work, and some of this work is like from, well, like 2014, right? So some of this work is from the really, early part of my songwriting like career. Um, and so in a way, this compilation has been part of my grieving process, and really closing a chapter in my life, because I feel like I'm at a point where music is not like the most central, it's not like the main central experience of my life. It's not like the main galvanizing force of my life. There's been like just most of my time in New York City, I feel like it was like either working and like trying to pay the bills, and then with all my free time it was like, how do I finish this project, how do I, it was just that like constant focus on music. So I'm actually, also kind of closing a chapter on this. I know I'll keep making music and playing music, but it's interesting that, it's a shift where it's no longer this, it's no longer as much of a as large of a presence in my life. So I'm kind of like grieving, in a sense, I'm grieving that relationship to music, right? Um, and then why compost? Well, we can't compost the cassette tape. That would be a bad idea. But I am fascinated with the composting process. It is such a mystery to me. I think it's a mystery to most people. And, it's like we try it and it still works and it's just amazing. But I found this graphic because I just wanted to point out, like, there's so much life, like in what, we consider a compost pile, like these are the scraps, this is the garbage, this is like what we've, discarded. Um, and I think that's like actually a pretty good metaphor for the grieving process. It's like in grieving, it's such a painful experience. And a lot of the times, or at least, one, like denial, right, is a stage of grief. It's like grieving and that pain. It's like, it's not pain that we want to just embrace. Like it's such, we the compost pile of grief is like every sad or negative memory that you just want to like discard and wish that you could be rid of. But the fact is, um, this is all part of your life. And so the reason why I'm interested in composting as a metaphor is because there is still so much life in those painful experiences, in what we grieve. There's, and subconsciously, there's so much happening there. There's so much like inspiration and creativity that's brewing. So I love that this graphic shows all these, forms of life down to the microscopic, because it really goes to show that like nothing in your life is truly just worthless or waste, right? Everything in your life still can serve a purpose. Um, and so this slide has some scraps. I'm going to be making a companion zine to the cassette tape. So the way, um, when I'm like in my creative mode, I'm like a sponge. I'm constantly saving things, and I treat them like scraps. Like it's like keeping a scrapbook. I don't have a visual of my scrapbook because it's all like in email threads and like notes and stuff. But these are just a few of the scraps that I'm working with now. And I'll read this excerpt of this poem from Marge Piercy. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust. But the thing worth doing well done has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amphoras for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn, are put in museums, but you know they were made to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry and a person for work that is real. And the name of the poem is To Be of Use. I really, really, really love this poem. I just came across it fairly recently, but I really think it speaks to what I have been searching for in my own creative process and as a musician. I really make music to, you know, for that substance. Like I make music because it's part of my healing process. I make music because I'm trying to transmute, a painful experience or grief into something, something that can transcend that. So the pitcher cries for water to carry and a person for work that is real. So I think a lot of us can resonate with that. We're searching for work that's meaningful. We're creating, our own art um, that just carries so much meaning for us, right? So I included that, and then I'll also just read this out, which is Andrea Pitzer wrote a blog post. They're a reporter. I think they're a writer, but I think they also like actually still actively publish articles for news outlets. But I came across their Substack, and I love their Substack. So this is something that they wrote recently. With technology that exists today, anybody can fake making something new. Anybody can pretend to have done things they didn't. And I'm not going to say that AI has no uses, particularly in medical technology and computing. But when it comes to creating an idea that hasn't existed before, generative AI can't do it. When it comes to expressing yourself, only you can live and invent your own life. And I love that because, again, like we exist in a world where we're supposed to be, people are using AI to do their, to do all sorts of things, to write, to make paintings, right? It's pretty dystopian, but I just love that, this person is championing that the human spirit and like our capacity for creativity. There really is nothing should and ever could replace it. And I think um again, part of that is because we humans suffer, humans experience pain. Like we have experiences that we need to process, and AI doesn't. So I'm not worried about AI competing with me. And then here's another slide, scraps of wisdom. So just going back to the idea of composting and that being part of the creative process. Each little bit counts, nothing is wasted. Let me actually, there we go. Each little bit counts, nothing is wasted. Time is a gift, time transforms. Trust in nature, trust your instincts. And change is the only constant. So hopefully someone out there finds that useful. And then sprouts, these are my other projects that I mentioned earlier. I've got a pie club brewing. I want people to get together and just bake pies and talk about solidarity economics, which is, mutual aid and cooperatives and stuff. I think that would be really cool to create a learning circle about that. And then I also have another idea for blue vervain seeded paper. I recently came across this. Someone had like made their own paper that has seeds embedded in it, and I thought that's super cool. And blue vervain is, it grows at the NCL. It's a native plant that, is native to most of North America, so I figure if I'm gonna create something that has a wildflower seed in it, that's that is native, I wanna make sure it's it's actually native to most places. So I love blue vervain. I've been like down a rabbit hole with blue vervain. Um, and then I also have another project of doing some cover songs on a weekly basis. So that's it. I have a sunset show at the NCL on June 7, as Alva said. And if you want to find my music, it's on Bandcamp at rosabordallo.bandcamp.com. And that's my presentation.
Unmute myself. Oh, one. Okay, that should be fine. That was excellent. Also, blue vervain is what's behind me in my photo.
Oh, nice.
That's the seed
Yeah.
head. It's not usually that like humongous, and it's kind of silly because it makes me look like I have a fascinator on. But
It's great. I love it.
yes,
I
that
love
was
that photo. Yeah.
yeah, I love it so much. I keep it even though sometimes I'll try to like duck so it doesn't look so like silly in my meetings. But that was amazing. That was really cool to see a process and like inspirations of the site. Yes, I am sad that nobody from our other staff weren't able to join because most of them are off on Saturday and Caroline's at the garden. But yeah, I just think your project and your way of seeing the site are like the kind of perfect sort of like that's the kind of work that we wanted to inspire and and the space that we wanted to give artists. So that's really excellent. And I'm also, yeah, it's really, I mean, we could have a whole conversation about AI, but I definitely think, um, yeah, there's like someone told me the other day, it was like, even when they see things that have been created by AI, the sort of secondary thought is always that would be so much cooler if somebody had actually done that, like if a human had actually created that. And I think
Right.
that's because even as non-artists or like as consumers of art, even if we might be artists ourselves, like when we interact with art, I think part of the interaction is knowing like the amount of care and detail and sort of whatever repetitive motions or attention to fine detail go into it, and plan and sort of processing and synthesizing of information on a human level. So yeah, that's
Yeah, I think we want to connect with each other. It's like art is a one way that someone can be vulnerable and create a sense of intimacy, which AI can't.
yeah.